In the early 60s, a CIA operative proposed projecting a giant image of Christ into the night sky over Cuba to convince the Cubans that the second coming had arrived and that God wanted them to rise up against Castro. Now, President Kennedy's team supposedly rejected it. But that same plan only got bigger. So the planners realized a fake Christ only works on Christians. A staged plague only scares some people. But an alien invasion threatens everyone equally. At least that's what they think. No religion owns the alien narrative. No nation can claim it as their problem alone. So if you want to force the entire world to abandon its existing beliefs and unite under a single authority, aliens just might be the perfect trigger. So that's what the alleged Project Bluebeam describes. Holographic projections in the night sky, signals beamed directly into people's minds in a staged event so overwhelming and frightening that populations across the world would panic and demand a global authority to respond. Has this plan actually been working behind the scenes? I don't know. Today, 84% of Americans believe that the government's hiding what it knows about UFOs. 1 in 5 people think that alien contact has already been made. The U.S. Vice President recently said publicly that he thinks that these aliens are actually demons.
We saw aliens.gov.
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway.
But is it all the same operation, just on a bigger stage? My guest today is Matthew Ehret. He's a Canadian journalist, historian, and filmmaker who works from primary sources, declassified CIA documents, occult society archives, military PSYOP programs that most people have never even heard of. We get into real Cold War programs that used fake religious imagery to manipulate populations, connections between Nazi-era occultists and the founders of modern UFO religions. You'll see why this current trend of disclosure might have less to do with aliens and more to do with trying to replace what you believe. Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holehouse. This is my Hidden History series, a series where we go back into the documented record of the nation and the world and ask the questions that somehow never made it into our history books. Each episode, we're going to take something hiding in plain sight, something you can look up, people, places, photos, and records, things you can see with your own eyes. And I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm here to make sure that you've got the information you need to think for yourself. Because we know that we've been lied to about too many things, and it's time to start asking the right questions. Now, before we start, please hit that like button. It helps a lot with the algorithms on whatever platform you're watching from, and it helps to get this information out to more people. Also, please subscribe and share this with somebody who really needs to hear it, and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. And remember, every Man in America show is done as a podcast as well. So if you want to listen instead of just watch, go to your favorite podcast app. And if you use Apple Podcast and you want to do a real favor for me, leave a review on there. Apple really prioritizes these podcasts that have those reviews. So if you like the show, leave a review. It's going to help me reach more people. All right, let's get started with this interview with Matthew Ehret. Mr. Matthew Ehret, man, it has been quite some time, but I always enjoy our conversation. So thanks for being here with us today.
I always enjoy them as well, so it's a pleasure.
One of the reasons why I like talking to you is the fact that your brain is a representation of all those books behind you, right? You're not someone that just has kind of theories you come up with. You're kind of going to sources, you're documented, you're citing things. And it's not that you don't get into the more conspiratorial things, because you do, but you go into them based upon historical records and facts and real information, which I always appreciate. So I'm really looking forward to digging into this topic today.
Thanks, man. Yeah, try to have a full arsenal of weapons that actually work when you're going into battle, right?
That's it. So there's a lot that we could talk about, but the main thing that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is this idea of, in essence, what you could say the elites trying to create and introduce some sort of one world religion that's based upon aliens, and primarily, especially here in the West, as a tool to replace Christianity. And I went and watched the horribly done Disclosure Day, which it's like from an objective standpoint of, was this movie well done and entertaining, ignoring all of the hidden messaging and manipulative stuff that was in it. It was just a crappy Hollywood chase scene movie with a broken plot, tons of plot holes. But ignoring all that, I went to watch it just as a study to understand, okay, what is the messaging in this? How does this tie into the government's now talking about releasing all the alien stuff? And you could see, at least from my perspective with that movie, that if I had to make one kind of point about, okay, this is the theme that I saw that was laced within it, it was aliens are real. They're some sort of higher form of religion. And if you're a Christian or whatever faith you're, but primarily Christian, you should really kind of reevaluate your faith because aliens need to be part of your faith, right? That was what I took away from it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on the movie. And then, of course, let's dig into the juicy stuff. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. Sure, man. Yeah, no, I think you're dead on to zero in on that very, very manipulative, clear messaging that was imbibed throughout the course of that banal film. And there were some interesting moments. In all fairness, the where the car gets like latched onto the train and you got to jump off. That was interesting to watch as a little bit of a. But overall, yeah, the idea that the director, the filmmakers, the studios wanted imbibed into the minds of the audience was certainly that human beings ultimately are inferior to these benevolent, beautiful, godlike, gray entities from the beyond who have been interfacing with us since the Roswell crash, of which there's even, spoiler alert, one living old alien who communicate principally through telepathic powers, mind-to-mind communication. I guess they lost the use of speech epochs ago in their evolution towards their superior big brainness. And they have empathy. Because they have empathy and we lack it, clearly, that's what makes them special. And also that they want to help humanity in our wayward ways to set ourselves right. You know, we're a creature of self-destruction, self-annihilation, of war. The entire movie, Disclosure Day, begins with, well, first a World Wrestling Federation match, so that which is very indicative of like the blue team and the red team, which is like the guy in blue and the guy in red battling out in a World Wrestling Federation environment, which is how the first scene of the movie. But then also World War III. There's always this background noise of we're on the verge of World War III and self-extermination as a background sort of context that a lot of people even miss. And then within that, these beings, these beautiful, noble beings, want to help us. But how do they want to help us? By abusing children and gifting through, trauma. We could talk about that, but basically by carrying out clear cases of ritual abuse, trauma, so traumatic that these kids fragment their memories, compartmentalize, and have big blank spots for big chunks of their childhood. And these are the main stars of the film, who have, as we come to discover, special gifted secret powers that are awakening to be the intermediaries, the prophets to interface between the rest of the plebe humanity and these ascended beings who have chosen them, when they were young, and now they're going to act through their prophetic destinies to save humanity, which ultimately is the big thing. And as you pointed out, there's these forced, contrived plot scenes and characters of nuns. One of the girlfriends of one of the chosen prophets is a former nun. And, there's some time spent at her convent where they've got these forced dialogues between her and the head nun, describing how ultimately, God's benevolence must have also been dispensed to other creatures that have evolved in other star systems like these grays, and that maybe God doesn't even exist as a true idea. It's just a concept that we believe in that organizes us, and thus it's important. But that's not the basis upon which any true theology should ever be founded, in my mind. So you got these just forced things of nuns becoming more open-minded and taking you, if you're a Christian or somebody with some Christian proclivities, to go through that process of transformation with those characters to become a follower of the new UFO, the ET cult, which I think was what Steven Spielberg has been devoted to since he first put out Close Encounters of the Third Kind and ET the Extraterrestrial back 40 years ago. I think his whole life has kind of been devoted to this mandate. And the fact that this is coming out at a time where you have, U.S. congressional inquiries into U.S. government ET communications that are underway as we speak. They've been amplifying in their messaging over the past 4 years, but it's only going to, it's clearly amplifying even more. You've got, J.D. Vance giving public communications about his view of ETs not only being real, but actually being demons and angels. And you've got high level people right now chiming in at this very moment in lockstep. And I think this is all being done, like you just pointed out, to ultimately bring us towards some form of a reset of religions that maybe don't get rid of all elements of Christianity or all elements of Judaism, but keep maybe the surface appearance of Christianity and Judaism, but now with a rebranded idea that what you actually thought you were doing as a Jew or as a Christian or even as a Muslim when you were, praying to Allah and reading the Quran or praying to God and reading the Bible is actually interfacing with superhuman ET prophets who, were communicating, were being gifted. Maybe Jesus was himself a trauma-based child who was gifted with these attributes through the ascended beings who gave him the power to walk on water and heal the dead, like E.T. the Extraterrestrial from Spielberg's film. Maybe Jesus was an extraterrestrial. Maybe Allah, that's what's the story of him like floating up into heaven. Maybe he was actually floating on a UFO. And so they're rebranding, they're redefining what everybody thought they were doing around a new acceptable kind of set of, sacred myths to define the post-reset age.
Well, what's also interesting is that if you look at Project Bluebeam, right, and you kind of dig into some of those things, I forget the guy's original name. He's a Canadian guy, right, that originally had come out with this information. I remember him saying when reading through this that one of the most important things that they would have to do was that they would have to undermine the world religions, right? That was one of the keys. If they wanted to bring about a central, like one world religion, which we, and I want to kind of get into some of the deeper, kind of going back into history, what this means in terms of the overall agenda, but that it was very clear though, that they can't have all these different tribes that have their own independent belief systems that they're holding on to, that they're fighting for, which we've seen throughout history. Religion has been one of the few things that people will burn at the stake before they will relinquish their belief system. And so, I remember him really highlighting that they would have to, in some way, overcome that to shake up people's beliefs so that they would then believe in this. And how he described it is that talked about some sort of holographic projections in the sky using, voice of God technology or some sort of voice to skull technology where it's like, okay, if you're a Christian, you're like, hey, there's no way I'm going to worship some alien. That it's like, well, maybe they're going to make Jesus appear in the sky and you're going to hear this voice in your head that says, I am Jesus, listen to me, follow these aliens. You know what I mean? Like it's like that kind of gets into it. And it seems so weird and so sci-fi if it was just an independent story. Like it's kind of like if you read Dune or if you read any of these Lord of the Rings, it's like, oh, this is very clever and creative as a storyline. But then when you start to look into all of the ties between this agenda and very real things throughout history, you see that, oh, it's not just some creative Hollywood script, that this is actually part of a much bigger thing that goes back multiple generations. And so, with your background and your understanding of a lot of these bigger picture ideas and psychological operations that trace back generations, help us understand some of the origins of this and how it ties into the occult or, however you kind of frame it. Because I know you've got this very vast understanding of these things, especially the history of secret societies and occultism and everything. So how do you, using that lens, how do you make sense of this alien agenda? Yes, the world is getting crazier every day. We know that. Every time you check the news, another crisis, conflict. You can't control what happens out there. You should know that by now, but you can control how you prepare for it. You can make sure no matter what happens, you have the basics covered in each one of these disasters that could reach your doorsteps. Things like having food to eat when the shelves are empty. That's a big one. So when it comes to food security, My Patriot Supply is a great option out there for you. Very affordable. They've helped millions of Americans get prepared. They've got over 90,000 five-star reviews. Right now, you can get their best-selling 3-month emergency food supply for $100 off. They rarely do deals like this. To check it out, if you want to get stock up, just get a 3-month supply. Highly recommend having at least a month. Honestly, at least get to a month. 3 months is great. If you want to check it out, go to Prepare with MIA, Made in America. So preparewithmia.com. The food kit gives you about 2,000 calories a day, lasts up to 25 years. And again, it's $100 off. So preparewithmia.com and go get yours right now.
There's so many directions I could take it right now. Number one, I just sent you a little link on X to an actual holographic projection that has been, and there's dozens and dozens of these things that have been filmed over the skies. I think this one might be of California. That's just one of many, I think, test cases that they're using right now. There's things like that all over the skies of Brazil, of a lot of Latin American countries, different types of Jesus holograms that have been featured using certain forms of holographic technology, just to see, I think, how people would react. The specific program, it's difficult to research Blue Beam, admittedly. Like Serge Monaz is a Quebecois. He died a mysterious death in the 90s. He seems to have been the first person to blow the whistle on this and describe the general agenda, but it feels like there might be a little bit of a limited hangout with what he was doing, because when I try to investigate Blue Beam as a project in any other way beyond his simple words and what he wrote, it's almost impossible to research, to verify in the form that he talks about it. So I feel like it might be one of those things where they take a lot of the truths and repackage it in a way that is they give it a story, like the Collins Elite story that was kind of created as something which captures a lot of truth, associates it with something that is unprovable, and in order to then guarantee debunking will always be possible later on. However, doesn't mean it isn't true. Because we know that Colonel Edward Lansdale, who ran Operation Phoenix in Vietnam, was actually the first person to bring to the surface this methodology, which back in 1960, when he first floated elimination through illumination to, I think this was originally to President Kennedy. He's also the guy who worked with Lyman Lemnitzer, the head of the U.S. Joint Chiefs that Kennedy fired in 1962, who had floated the Operation Northwoods program to have an excuse to invade militarily Cuba, with the idea that terrorism had destroyed a passenger jet, and Kennedy was repulsed. He was disgusted by this, and luckily rejected it. I think it took them a few more decades to finally bring it back 2.0 in 9/11.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like all the 9/11 debunkers. It's like, well, you realize that you can go find the actual operation that was proposed and rejected, where they're going to do the exact same thing: hijack a passenger plane, crash it, kill everyone on board, claim it was a terrorist attack, and use that as an excuse to start a war. Basically, it's like. Yeah,
it's already there. But so Lansdale and this guy Lyman Lemnitzer were both very close. They worked together very much with Allen Dulles and the CIA MKUltra program. And in this elimination through illumination, that was Lansdale's program for sending high intensity lights at night over Cuba in order to project the image as though Christ is returning and it's the end of Revelation, or the fulfillment of Revelation. And the idea was to get the message somehow to the Cuban people to overthrow Castro in order to satisfy what Jesus wanted them to do, because Castro is the Antichrist, was what the message was supposed to be. And again, that was not accepted by JFK. But the idea I don't think ever went away fully. And Lansdale got to really go to town. First, he was in the Philippines, and then he was sent to Vietnam to work on the CIA program of capitalizing on the superstitious beliefs of local target populations. So, for example, there was this mythology in Vietnam that your ancestors would haunt certain areas of jungles and of forests if they died unnatural deaths, and he basically had sent. This is actually acted upon in Vietnam. There were speakers fitted to airplanes that would fly when it was heavily clouded, portraying messaging in the Vietnamese language down through the clouds to local populations, and really with the focus of the resistance, those who were trying to fight the invaders, which was unfortunately the Americans on the wrong side of history at that moment, portraying the idea that their ancestors were displeased with them fighting and that they should give up. And it actually did take the wind out of the sails of a lot of the rebels. And this other thing that he ended up doing also, this was in the Philippines, was he recognized that the Philippines have this belief in the aswang, these vampire beings that lived in the jungles. And what he had his Green Beret, because he was running the Green Beret operations, and this is as he was also building up a capability first in the Philippines that he then transported and replicated in Vietnam, in the south of Vietnam. Is what he did is they would kidnap civilians, they would kill them, puncture holes in their neck to have them bleed out upside down, and then hang them in the jungle so that those rebels who are fighting in the jungle would encounter these upside down beings drained of blood, these civilians who have been killed by the Green Berets, get freaked out that the Aswangs were here, and then run for cover. And he gave a statement saying that this was one of his greatest successes. This is in the 60s. So they were already doing a lot of these things on the test case of Vietnam as a laboratory for a number of years. Now, coming out of that, who was running Operation Phoenix, which was a mass genocide campaign? Over 40,000 civilians were tortured, eliminated in the course of the time that Operation Phoenix was overseen. Well, his right-hand man was Colonel Michael Aquino, a leading occultist in America, who was the second in command of the Temple of Satan, or the Church of Satan, under Anton LaVey. That same Michael Aquino was the top Green Beret operator who was assigned to oversee Operation Phoenix with Colonel Lansdale for years in Vietnam. It was like Marlon Brando Apocalypse Now shit. Forgive my French. And coming out of that process, there he is. Yep.
Bad so dude. I've got some of his books. But yeah, bad guy though. Bad guy.
Yeah, very bad guy. And I see. So I sense that the entire Vietnam War was a bit of an occult initiation ritual for a new vanguard elite that would come out through the fires of the torture, the murder, the death that no human should ever have to experience and participate in, the My Lai massacres, the burning down of the villages to save the villages. All of this stuff was really breaking a whole generation of young men, turning them into either drug fiends, and for those who were really put through the ringer inside of these special forces operations that Lansdale was overseeing, they would often come out of this like Aquino as full-blown Satanists.
Yeah. Well, if you look at, sorry to jump in, if you look at Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which I think allegedly was 1958 was when it was first published, pre-Vietnam War, it like highlighted that specifically, how the use of these wars was a way of separating the mother from the children, especially separating the mother from the boys, but also it was a mechanism to, have you read that before? Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars?
I've read a summary of it, but I didn't read
all of it. It's a really easy book to read. It's maybe 40 or 50 pages. And you can find the PDF online everywhere. You can get them on reprints on Amazon. But allegedly, the idea was that this guy discovered the book in a copier machine that he was buying used copier machines and for some purpose, I think in the 80s. And allegedly, he found a printout of one of these that was still in one of the copy machines. This book called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. And the story was that it was originally distributed, I think, at maybe one of the first Bilderberg meetings in 1958. And it in detail outlined how to basically collapse America. It's almost
kind of like the Iron Mountain report kind of dovetails that a bit.
Similar. Yes, similar. But if you read it now, it's almost prophetic in terms of like what it kind of gets into. But one of the things in there is they talked about the role of war as where they could take these young Christian men and then destroy their faith in God by sending them off to war. And so they'd come back as atheists. They'd come back with no belief anymore, and they'd come back so broken that they would, and you could destroy a whole generation of young men, which it goes hand in hand with what you're talking about there.
Yeah. No, exactly. That sounds very, very on point. And yeah, I think that's exactly what happened, and if you look at if you're just looking at it from a statistical, like if you're a statistical analyst looking at the origins and the occurrences, the reported occurrences of the phenomena that we would typically associate with the whole scenario, like the whole story of UFO encounters with humanity. You've got two things. One, right after World War II is where you start seeing these big spikes in observations and there clearly were things being seen in the sky. I make the case in my third episode. My wife and I have done a series of films that is ongoing. We've made 4 films that are released and publicly available called The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs. So episode 1 to 4 is ready. Episode 3 deals with the evidence of the actual flying saucer programs, the alternative aeronautical designs that the Nazis were actually working on before and during World War II, which were absorbed by the Manhattan Project Paperclip, which was sort of a new iteration of the Manhattan Project secret science program that required test flights, oftentimes that were not always successful, of new proto drone technologies, things that civilians living near air bases in England and the United States would look out their windows sometimes and observe it in the night sky, weird behavior, and they were seeing something real, but who was telling them who was helping them to interpret what they were seeing was the job of the CIA myth makers, who then had this concept of creating a meta narrative around which, over generations, perhaps a new myth and a new sacred story of even the origins of humanity itself could be infused, which was always the idea when you read the writings of a lot of these myth makers from the top, which I go through in my film series. But the next new wave of an anomalous behavior, again, keep in mind everything I just said about Lansdale, elimination through illumination, the Aswang program in Vietnam, were cattle mutilations, which only begin in 1973. Before that, there are no cattle mutilations. But all of a sudden, you start seeing these anomalous cattle just showing up in ranchers' fields. It's clearly, they've been through something terrible. But why in 1973? Why is it that the cases of the alien abductions, people accounting how they not only were visited by aliens like the children in the Spielberg movie, but that the type of activity that happened to them during their encounters were pretty much in alignment with what people who have been victims of satanic occult ritual abuse also suffered from and reported. Why is that only happening in the late 60s and not really, we don't have cases like that before that? I think the first direct case of an alien abduction case being reported was in 1962, right? And then they start getting more and more descriptive of actual ritual abuse. Is it that nothing is happening to them and it's all in their heads? No, I don't think so at all. I think just like people looking at their night sky in 1947, we're actually seeing something real, but we're having it repackaged as far as being told what they're seeing by the myth makers controlling the media and what have you. So too did these people who would wake up, drugged up, dizzy in a field half a mile from their house with puncture wounds in their arms and a pain in their ass that they couldn't explain, with little fragments of memories that were so horrific that were often blocked up and compartmentalized, or where they were recollected, recallable, had creatures in face masks doing weird things to them, little green men, gray men, whatever. And how easy would So you're like, okay, that's weird. Where was it that actual demons and aliens were necessarily doing satanic abuse on them? Maybe, or maybe, the Charles Manson cult family operation of creepy crawly was part of something bigger, because we know Charles Manson was part of a CIA mind control operation anyway. The guy was under complete observation. There's a book called Chaos, the CIA and the Manson family. It's a fantastic book. But we know that one of the rituals that he deployed his family out to do was called creepy crawly. I've got a book on it, where they would go into thousands of houses in the rural and suburban neighborhoods of America and just move things around, do certain things to spook the people who are asleep. And you crawl into their windows or their unlocked doors and you move things around. How easy would that be for them to be wearing masks, which we know also satanic cults also do when they're going to be carrying out a ritual? It helps them also get into an outer body experience to detach themselves from their identities and embody the type of demon spirit that is the mask that they're wearing. That's part of the usefulness of having masks. But the other thing too is the people who are then getting doped up while they're sleeping on a hallucinogenic product of some sort, or chlorophyll or whatever, are seeing little fragments of memory as they're being pulled out of their house and whatever else is happening to them, And so the fact that the girl, again, in the Spielberg movie Disclosure Day, is finally recalling at the very end of the film the fragmented memories. It's creepy as sin, right? Because, number one, we know that two things are happening in my comments at the same time. Yes, the what Serge Mada is talking about is very real about holographic technology, though maybe Blue Beam is not the actual name for it. But I think that it's quite evident that they're going to be doing things like this in higher frequencies very soon. Number two, the imagery of the girl, she's finally recalling when she was 7 years old and these aliens came into her bedroom full of butterflies on the little monarch butterflies all over the walls, right?
Oh yeah, and the single eye, it focuses in with a butterfly opens its wings right in the eye. I mean, it was like, to me, it's like the Venn diagram of the UFO kind of capture stuff and MKUltra. It's like there's almost a complete overlap, and that's what I saw too when I was watching this, because I've done a whole series on interviewing SRA victims and people that were part of the CIA MKUltra programming, and what they described. It's frightening. It's horrible stuff. But when I was watching the Spielberg film, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is straight up MKUltra. Like, and that's exactly what it is. It's oftentimes it's young children. They're put into, they wake up in these very strange environments that they're tortured, and that's what you saw in that film. It was really disturbing from the perspective of understanding how real it actually was, of taking these young children, traumatizing them. And I mean, even that scene you're describing, like that, it was a very disturbing scene. This young girl, this young boy laying on two kind of medical beds next to each other on some sort of supposed alien craft, with these things coming down near their eyes, and it was straight up MKUltra, right? Like MKUltra alien.
Hansel and Gretel's house.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, even that. I'm surprised it wasn't Alice in Wonderland. I mean, it was like,
no. I mean, for anybody who knows their folklore, I mean, Hansel and Gretel, that says a lot. And they don't. This is the name of the weird cabin in the woods that's glowing that the girl is taken to as she's following these Disney-like creatures that came into her bedroom, looking like these beautiful animal spirits of a fox creature and a raccoon and a deer that are guiding her out of the house into the woods with a glowing cabin that all she could keep on repeating is Hansel and Gretel's house. But they don't explain it. But it's like, that's a big slap in the face for anybody who knows what MKUltra is and knows what satanic ritual abuse is, and the reality of witch covens that were spread all over Europe in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, 19th century, that people like the Grimm brothers were writing cautionary tales that were very real to parents, to be aware of how your children are seduced by candy, by the witch covens that are strewn throughout the Bohemian and Prussian forests that were causing children to disappear from villages. That was a very real intervention against the witchcraft which didn't disappear with the 20th century scientific age, right? It just took on maybe a bit more of a sci-fi front. In Hollywood with Marina Abramovich working with Microsoft and stuff like that. That's, and Oracle AI, but it's still very present. So the fact that that's what she's walking into, which is actually the UFO, she's just hallucinating. And then, like you said, she's lying there and this other poor kid is having the appropriate reaction of freaking the hell out. She's just kind of like traumatized stiff. This other kid, the boy, who later on is her, the other protagonist in the film, who's the other chosen new human, more evolved human that's been shaped to have these special powers through, which is what you get through trauma somehow in their mind, is you traumatize a child and then you unlock their special powers of, I don't know. But you've spoken to the SRI survivors. That's sort of a theme that comes up, is that these psychiatrists who have been doing work on MKUltra and then MKUltra 2.0 out of Stargate in the 70s and 80s on trauma-based mind control operations and victims that often are given by their families who are born into cults, like the Edgar Cayce cult. There's a lot of that was directly tied to the SRI operation. They're all describing how there's this obsession to create these Jedi super soldiers who can travel the astral plane and bend spoons and do clairvoyant and read minds and stuff. And that's somehow the idea that you can get these things if you break them young. I don't know. But yeah, so it's, sorry, I have a little rant there.
Oh, no, it's okay. So how does this, how does this then fit into this idea of some sort of global one world religion, right? And kind of getting into, is this something that you see the Vatican being involved with? Is this like, in terms of, I know they've got the Lucis Trust, they've got a lot of things that indicate some sort of Luciferian high level kind of doctrine that obviously would be in direct opposition to Christianity, right? They're kind of the, as far as I understand with my own studying of trying to understand what is this belief system, they believe that actually that kind of Lucifer is the kind of, he's kind of like the Christ, right? And that Jesus Christ is he's the deceiver, right? So everything's inverted, right? That actually that people have been lied to, and they've been following this idea of Christ, but actually that Christ is the deceiver and that Lucifer is he's the real bringer of light, right? And so when you get into this idea of trying to use this alien kind of psyop, this psychological operation, as this tool to replace Christianity, as this tool to maybe replace it, but to modify it, to then bring it under the kind of control umbrella of some sort of centralized system, how does that tie into with occultism or Luciferianism, or like, where do you see that happening?
Yeah, well, you're right to identify the Luciferian origins of this kind of cult that is theosophical in essence. And Blavatsky, in her Secret Doctrine, made a big emphasis upon the Venusians, the Lords of the Flame. Sanat Kumara was one of the names of the Lords of the Flame from Venus, part of these etheric beings that she said were overseeing the Ascended Masters, the Council of Nine Ascended Masters that she, because she's so special, was able to interface with and channel, to deliver a new dispensation of mankind, Saint Germain and Master Moria and Kuthumei and all these. She just made people up pretty much. Cagliostro, I think, might have been one of them. But then above that council were these etheric beings that she said emanated from their base of operations on Venus. Now, Venus, going back to ancient times, has been labeled the morning star because it's the star you see in the morning, the planet you see in the morning at dawn, and also at dusk. It's also inversely implies that it's also the night star. So it's the star. So if you hear concepts like the black star or the black sun, a lot of that has a Venusian Luciferian concept to it. The morning star, which also has the inversion. It's a dualistic idea of that which rises, that which sets, that which goes into light, that which goes into darkness. So you've got this convergence of opposites notion, which the Gnostics relied very heavily onto as they were battling early Christianity to try to who was gonna be able to come out victorious and lay claim to this new thing called Christianity. Was it going to be these Gnostic sects, which were largely seeded by Hermetic, Neoplatonic occultists from the, higher cults, the mystery schools of Mithra, of Cybele, of Isis, which were seeding these pseudo-Christian initiatory cults in the 2nd to 5th or 4th centuries. And again, they relied heavily on this idea of convergence of moral opposites as part of their ritual to purge the initiate from their previous identity, basically rewire them, deconstruct them from the shackles of morality, of conscience, of the traditional values that were holding them back from doing what they wanted to truly do as the uninhibited Dionysian sort of
do as thou wilt, right?
Yeah, do what thou wilt, pretty much. So the fact that Blavatsky made that such a core foundation that a lot of people miss is that it's these, and that's also why she at the same time set up the Lucifer Publishing, or the Lucifer Magazine, in 1888 as the primary propaganda magazine for the Theosophical school, or the Theosophical perennial philosophy that she was trying to create. And part of the ambition was to take elements of all of the world's cultures, extract the most supernatural mysticism of each of the world's cultural traditions, package it into some, there you go. Package it into some, syncretic, I guess is the word to say, syncretic stew that welcomes and absorbs everything. But all of the actual moral lessons that contain anything really useful in the world of religions will be iced out. That won't be welcomed. So you just take in the supernatural stuff, the mysticism, like the mystery religion elements of Confucianism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Gnostic Christianity is welcome. Other forms of Nicene Christianity is not welcome. Take Sufi Islam is fine. Any types of Islamic currents that encourage moral values, that's not okay. So you take in Kabbalism, that's an okay Judaism. Any type of Judaism that actually focuses on studying the Bible and doing good in life, that's not welcome. So you want to just try to create this new thing that will absorb then everybody, but with this new story of the higher beings, the angels, the demons, the gods, as being these specific ascended entities from, again, Venus. Now, if you think about the origins of a lot of the UFO, the religious aspect of the UFO phenomenon coincided with the first observations of the flying saucers that were being reported in 1946-47. The Kenneth Arnold sighting, the Roswell crash happening around the same time, the Montauk operation, that was also being revealed again by Fred Chrisman, who was working with Kenneth Arnold at documenting publicly in these cases of flying discs.
If you could go back in time and buy oil before the world relied on it, would you? Of course you would. Anyone would. So why aren't you buying silver right now? You see, the people who recognized oil early didn't just make money. They got ahead of one of the biggest economic shifts in history. And today, a similar opportunity is unfolding with silver, because silver is a lot more than just a precious metal. It's a critical resource used in solar panels, electric vehicles, defense systems, AI infrastructure, and even these massive data centers that are powering our digital world and the surveillance grid. So while demand keeps growing, it's actually still affordable enough that the average American can start accumulating it right now. And that's why investors are turning to silver to protect against inflation and own one of the world's most important strategic resources. Don't be the person who looks back in 10 years and says, I saw it coming, but I just didn't act. I'm sorry. So visit goldwithseth.com and learn just how easy it is to own physical silver. Again, that's goldwithseth.com. And here's something a little bit extra. If you just mention my name when you reach out to Noble Gold, they're going to send you a 1/10 ounce of gold coin just as a thank you when you open a new qualified account. So again, that's goldwithseth.com.
Those original UFO cults that were trying to immediately capture this movement and turn it into the foundations of a new religion, they seem kind of quirky and fringe and weird at the time, and they still do when you look back at the George Adamski's, the Aetherius Society, the I Am movement of Guy Ballard and Edna Ballard, who were also talking about interfacing with Venusians, and also beings that extended to Sirius as well, the Dog Star, which was another element early on that was being infused. William Dudley Pelley which was the American Nazi, the head who ran the American Nazi silver shirts in the 1930s. That same William Dudley Pelley was formerly a theosophical high priest in the 1920s, a clairvoyant, who then after World War II, when he got out of jail, creates his new ET cult, very closely aligned with George Adamski. Again, George Adamski was the head of the Royal Tibetan Theosophical Lodge in the 1920s in California, who then goes on and says, oh, it's actually these Venusian beings, the Space Brothers that have met with me. And he starts telling these incredible tales using clearly fake evidence of like he's a photographer and can do double exposure films, and he's basically just making, like his table lamp. He's retrofitting it to make it look like a UFO that he then cuts out of a photograph, plasters onto his backyard skyscape, and then it gets publicized in the media and everything as if he took actual pictures of UFOs. It's all been debunked. It's been proven that he's a hoaxer. But the fact that he was the head of this Theosophical Society, who was, again, very much in alignment with the pro-Nazi groups in America in the 1930s and 40s, and then becomes the founder of this thing, he's describing these Venusians as these Aryan, Teutonic, blue-eyed, blonde-haired super beings, these advanced, more evolved Ubermenschen, coming and just meeting humanity on the earth, the chosen elite who will then be selected to correct the errors of Christianity and other things. And a lot of them are using some, like William Dudley Pelley is using a Christian theosophical language in order to recruit soft-minded Christians into his cult. But then he's making correctives because he's a channeler, right? He's got the Holy Spirit. He's touched. The Holy Spirit just happens to be, inkling him up the art maybe, and has a Venusian finger to it. But it's that's really at the heart of the whole thing. Is this Luciferian undercurrent that's associated with the planet Venus, and that has like millennia of mythology built up around it, around which a lot of these mystery cults have built their degree systems. So yeah, I do think that it's, and then again, as science evolved more and more, advanced more and more in the 40s and the 50s, and we started discovering more planets like Pluto, well, was known in the 20s, but they had to then, and we started discovering that, okay, there's actually other star systems. There's other galaxies that are not within our galaxy, but there's this, as our refined measurement tools increased, they expanded their mythology to then incorporate a little bit more into the space opera that they set up. New other species from, the shape-shifting lizard people, for example, that want to suck our loosh, our fear energy, and maybe suck it into, that's their matrix like energy source as human beings having fear and anxiety. That's actually what they need, and they want it, so they suck it because that's what powers their advanced civilization in another dimension or in another planet or another galaxy or whatever. There's different variations of the theme, whether you're David Icke or whether you're Maurice Doreal, who was, again, a theosophical high priest in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, working in Mount Shasta, developing his holy order of, what was it, the White Lodge Brotherhood or something, which still exists in Colorado, and around which he was like taking his hermetic, studies, because he was a hermeticist, and describing how these alien entities were actually not Aryan, beautiful space brothers like Adamski was saying. It was a controlled opposition. He's like, no, it's actually, these are shape-shifting lizard people, and they've infiltrated our society and our governments. And he was like coming out with this whole thing. When you look at the guy, though, he looks like a pre Michael Aquino Temple of Set type of figure with inverted pentagrams and stuff, but acting like he really cares about humanity, and creating the foundations around which David Icke later on rehashes a lot of those things that he's already establishing in the 40s and the 50s into the 60s, around, again, the evil aliens that Stephen Greer then says, no, you're wrong. These are the good, benevolent aliens, and they're going to save us. And then people then fight amongst themselves over, like, which side do you want to side with? And it's like, well, maybe both sides are controlled opposition. Did you think of that? And maybe all of these other, and then, now Philip Corso says there's not two species. There's actually more like 18 species that are fighting each other. And we're like on the side of one of the better species that we signed a treaty with. But the other species that we also signed a treaty with has broken their treaty, and they're fighting us. And or they're about to like, exterminate us, but we got the good aliens who are going to help us. And then you got the Falun Gong people who are like, no, like, saying that, no, we're definitely on the side of the better aliens, but all of the aliens are bad. And the Chinese are being run by the really bad aliens trying to sucker vital fluids. But we're on the slightly less bad aliens, but they're still pretty bad because they have been possessing us since the 15th century to create technology, says the head of Falun Gong to his disciples, and has taught them that the entire all technological improvement is just simply the aliens using us to create modern science so that the aliens can then express themselves in the form of some form, because they're disembodied. They have to use our bodies. They're infesting us, but they need, as they use our bodies, so we don't actually have free will. We thought we did, but we don't. We're actually instruments, kind of like what the Gnostics believed, that we were instruments for the archons, the elemental archons. This is like in the 2nd, 3rd century, that possess us and cause us our anxiety, our feelings of fear and sadness is actually archons, artificial foreign entities that we have to be exorcised from. You're right. This is partially also what you see
almost
in Scientology.
Kind of like a demonic possession, right? That these
that we're all possessed in varying degrees of a variety of these things, and only by going through their specific recipe books of this cult or that cult or this Scientology auditing system or this.
Well, because Scientology also like is like, because I haven't studied Scientology extensively. I've kind of looked into not like as a, hey, is this a potential path I want to take? No. More like, okay, what's going on here? There's some weird stuff happening. I know that Scientology is heavily vested in aliens, right? And kind of this belief. And so it's like what you see though with looking at Scientology is a good example. If I understand correctly, there's something where they're kind of looking at it as it seems like Scientology would be something that's closer to what this kind of new world order religion would be, right? Which is this, like, they're kind of utilizing the aliens as this path of ascension, right? I mean, is that, and so that one thing I actually wanted to ask you is, because you're getting into Venus, you're getting into this, I also know that Saturn is also very key, right? You get into Saturn and the black cube, and that kind of plays into it. And so, but when you're looking at this stuff and looking at kind of identifying the core of this overall agenda, I mean, is it something that you see, like, where do you think this is being orchestrated from? Is this coming out of like the basement of the Vatican? Is it, how do you kind of piece that all together?
It will infiltrate everything, right? You got like good people who have historically operated through the Vatican. They're often popes who die of mysterious deaths and who are trying to take down such agencies like the Jesuits or the Opus Dei operation that they're trying to get into alignment with some, so there's a whole array of dead popes from Clement XIV, who kicked out the Jesuits from Europe and said, this will be the death of me, to very, very bad agents, just like we have American presidents. There's good men who are actually like, reading the Bible, reading their Constitution, taking it seriously to shape their identities and acting accordingly, and are not afraid to risk their lives in service of their conscience. And then there's agents who are installed usually over the dead body of these presidents who don't care at all, like the pro-Nazi Pius II, the 12th, who was inserted in 1939 over the dead body of Pius XI. Pope Pius XI was actually fighting the fascists, was like really going to war with the whole like rise of fascism in Europe. And then his convenient death created a space for his enemy, and also one of the followers of Coudenhove-Kalergi, to be brought in as the new pope. And then this guy became the super pro-Nazi pope. So you got this whole battle within the Vatican, just like you have battle in all institutions. I think the Jesuits get you a little bit closer to one of the, it's not a Jesuit conspiracy, but the Jesuits are an instrument to advance this cultural religious reset for centuries. The followers of Pierre de Chardin, I think, are the most virulent of the Jesuits, especially of the 20th century, that have been playing a role to synthesize, the edicts of Darwinism with Christianity, with other mystery traditions that are of a theosophic kind of flavor, into something new with an outward teaching for the uninitiated and an inner teaching for the initiated. And that's always what you get with the Theosophists, the Gnostics, whatever, is you always get not one but two parallel teaching structures, where one seems all innocuous, kind of harmless for the outer uninitiated or lower order degrees, and then something that's the real thing, which is usually the inside out game that good is bad.
It's kind of like the Freemasons, right? It's like, just because your uncle's like a 5th degree Freemason, he's not eating babies. He might be actually, building homes for the homeless, right? But it's exactly. Just kind of like you had the public facing Shriners. Exactly.
And frankly, even at the higher degrees, I think that even the 32nd and 33rd degrees, I've met a couple of people who I think are really decent human beings at the very higher degrees. But I think that there's not one single set of degrees. I think that people at the 18th degree might be given the same test of kill the kitten or whatever. I'm just making this up. And one person does it. The other person says, I'd rather not. And they're both told they passed the test. But now what they're both going to now experience with the 19th degree, the 20th degree, is going to be two very different sets of experiences, where the person who went the distance is going to be brought into the real thing and will be then positioned in areas of influence of higher power in the real society as a control mechanism, versus the person who did the moral thing. They will still go through the routine. They'll go through the steps in the further degrees, but they won't realize that this is like the superfluous degree. So I think that there's that element. I've seen enough evidence that's caused my mind to move in this domain now. I'm thinking that there's two parallel degrees even there. Number two, Saturn. So yeah, in a lot of these degree systems, Mithra being one degree ancient mystery cult that we knew a lot of, that still exists today in a very, very virulent way. This is what Michael Aquino was overseeing with Lansdale in Vietnam, was this new Mithraic revamping of the elite brood inside of the military. So it's the idea of creating Mithraic super soldiers. This is where it was a male only, predominantly warrior oriented cults of Rome that was brought into Rome via Anatolia. It was formerly of a Persian skin suit, but it was transported into Rome. And every member of the Praetorian Guard, of the Roman Legion, if you even like something like 12 emperors were initiated into the cult of Mithra. It was a Sol Invictus, it was a solar cult, with Mithra killing the bull, looking over at Helios and away from Luna. But Luna and Helios were sort of the opposite ideas of dark and light deities that you co-worship with altered states of revelry and ecstasy at night, mixed in a Dionysian kind of way or a Bacchanalian kind of way. Whether you're Dionysus in the Greek or the Bacchus in the Romans, it's the same friggin' thing. Doing orgies, drugs, ecstasy at night, and then Apollonian sort of Helios-like dutiful morality in the daytime, a very Kantian morality that you project in the daytime, and you have to like live in this Bruce Wayne, Batman kind of dualistic identity that splits you off more and more. And part of the degree system is pretty well documented. It was 7 degrees. There might have been, I think there was an 8th degree, but it was based upon the planets and the positioning of the planets and the meaning infused into the meaning of the different planets and the deities associated with each planet. And at the highest degree was Saturn, the Saturnian degree. And Saturn has been sort of amongst occult circles, has been interpreted historically as sort of the Roman version of Kronos. It has meaning of Kronos being the god of wasting time that eats the children. That Kronos is often portrayed eating his children. There's mythologies also of Kronos eating the babies. It's a cannibalistic idea, but it's idea of the god of boundaries that causes death. There's life, but then there's death, and the thing that puts in the boundaries is Saturn, right? And if it's how to word this, it's sort of a prototype for the idea of Satan. Oh yeah, that's Goya's Kronos, Saturn eating his child, or one of his children. Goya does some fantastic renditions. Just look at the eyes, right? Like he's really painting the essence of this oligarchical parasite, which is horror. Like it's there's
disturbing.
a horror in the eyes. Yeah. But it's like he can do nothing but this thing. It's like he's possessed by something that is compelling him onward to this unhuman activity. And there's many other examples that we see in great paintings featuring Kronos doing this, Saturn doing this. It's the same thing. So Aleister Crowley, for example, puts a lot of emphasis when he builds up his out of the Pan Sophia Lodge, because he's fighting for the. There you go. There's so many. It's horrific. But it's a little bit too close to reality when you know some of the more ugly undercurrents of what's shaping our current day, right? And so Crowley has an order of Saturn that is a group that spins out of his OTO lodge, which Hubbard and Parsons were both high initiates of in California. But the Ordo Templi Orientis lodge that Crowley runs starting from 1907, he's already being assigned, or no, 1912 is when he gets control of the English-speaking lodges in America and England. And then he later on, as you know, he brings in Thelema, he brings in the sex magic into the initiator degrees. He adds more coloring to what the degree of Saturn is at the highest, and he ends up laying claim to against any Besant. So it's again these fake debates that tend to happen with these theosophical and hermetic orders. Is you got Eddie Besant and Charles Ledbetter, the rampant pedophile oracle himself, Ledbetter, who are like grooming this kid who's supposed to be the new Messiah, the new Maitreya, Jiddu Krishnamurti. This poor kid who's clearly being abused by Ledbetter, who's abusing hundreds of children under his care. He gets it's so embarrassing that this stuff comes out that he gets kind of kicked out of the Theosophists. But this kid is supposed to be the world teacher as he's being sold to, and he finally freaks out. He's like, I don't want it. But then Crowley is like, see, he doesn't want it. It's mine. I'm the world teacher. And he builds a whole following that create the Saturn Lodge, the Order of Saturn. In Germany first, that has a huge influence in the inner echelons of the SS. Even though the Nazis frown upon theosophy, they do crack down on many of these occult lodges, which is why a lot of people today seem to like Hitler, because they see, he cracked down on many of the secret societies, and it's like, yeah, kind of, but he took all of the worst elements into his own secret society of the Thule Society and the Vril Society and the inner New Templar Order of the SS. They just didn't want competition. It was just basically, a gangland thing where it's like, okay, we're the satanic cult that finally got the power. So the other satanic cults are unacceptable disruptors at this point, but they will then take in all of the elements of every satanic cult into their own thing. It's like the shutdown of the Cathars, because the church cracked down and did terrible things to the Cathars in the south of France. Does that mean the Cathars were good? No, the people who were running the crackdown of the Cathars were Satanists as well. They just were rivals, so they fake opposition. So I'm just saying this because, yeah, the idea of Saturn and the infiltration of the church, they will infiltrate Catholicism. They will infiltrate Protestantism. They'll infiltrate anything that they can. And then you'll find evidence when you look at the history of the battles within the Catholic, within the Protestant church, within the Jewish, traditions. You'll find battles of people who actually read their holy scriptures and think about the moral lessons contained within. And then even Jesuits, you got examples of I've actually in my research have found a number of Jesuits at different moments who are actually thinking about what Jesus is saying. And they're like, wait a minute, what I'm supposed to do is very much not working with what I'm reading in this thing. And they start getting off the reservation, and they often have to be eliminated or what have you, because they're not playing ball anymore. So the oligarchy will infiltrate and use anything as a skin suit to advance their overarching satanic agenda, and they want to get people who don't understand how this works to then blame. They want the Jews to blame the Muslims and the Christians. They want the Christians to blame the Muslims and the Jews. They want the Muslims to blame and then don't realize that there's actually, you have the same enemies that have infiltrated all of your different groups, and are bringing about the worst elements of each one of you to become conduits of destruction. And, so there's that.
And I think that we're kind of coming up on our hour here. I think that in essence summarizes a lot of what's happened, is that you have infiltration by evil into almost every centralized organization of power or influence. It's been infiltrated in various ways, and that they are using that to do a handful of things. One is to get the followers or believers of that particular system to then attack the other people, but also then to create evil within that system that then the other systems can attack that system, right? So and this is just, I mean, it's kind of warfare 101, right? If you kind of infiltrate your enemy's camp, you can use them to do bad deeds. You can then blame them for those bad deeds. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like, if your goal is to create destruction and confusion and create hostility and get these groups to focus on fighting the other group, that makes it much, a lot easier to then destroy all the groups and then come in and say, look, you guys are all screwed up and you're all fighting each other. You can't get along. You're causing holy wars. So let's just get rid of all that stuff and just kind of centralize everything. We're going to fix things. And you can see it too with governments. You can see that the same thing happens with looking at these sovereign nation states, where it's like, oh yeah, they infiltrate the governments. They corrupt them. They cause the governments to create all kinds of chaos. Then they blame the governments for the chaos that they've infiltrated and created. And now they come with the excuse to say, look, actually, this whole idea of these separate countries or separate governments, it doesn't really make sense. Look how much chaos there is in the world. Really, the only thing that we can really do is have some sort of centralized system. And that's just the same pattern you see over and over and over again.
Totally, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you make a mess, this problem, reaction, solution thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you introduce the so-called solution to the mess that you've just made. And it sounds banal in some way, because it is kind of banal, but it does rely on people. It's like how they got Napoleon. You take here's the thing too. I'll just say, and I know we're rounding out the show, but there is certain universal aspects of what humans are that we're not supposed to be in tune with. Not the fact that, okay, clearly there's the thinking side, the feeling side, they should work together, but sometimes, and we all know people who it's schism to varying degrees. They're overly logic at the expense of their heart, and other people who are overly emotional and who lose the ability to think logically, and their brains turn to mush as their powers of empathy overinflate and they become woke blubbering idiots. Which is also, I think, part of the messaging within this Steven Spielberg's film. We have to increase our heart energy and stop this tyranny of reason. That's what the aliens are going to gift us. but you ideally want both to work together so that your heart and your mind are naturally maturing together at the same time. And your conscience is influencing your empathy is influencing your thinking, but your thinking is also influencing your heart and thinking, well, which emotions are based on good reason? Which emotions do I have that are irrational? Why do I feel jealous irrationally when this happens? When this guy just looked at my wife or something, maybe that feeling is it part of an insecurity? And I could think about that and basic, self-examination stuff. It's just good. But this is replicated in whole institutions. So like in the French Revolution, you have on the one hand the Jacobins that are being organized around the masses, the poor, downtrodden, uncultured, uneducated masses who are overly empathic, and they become the Jacobin left that's organized to just channel your energy into rage against the machine, rage against all injustice, and they become the battering ram to destabilize the state that was supposed to have an American Revolution in France, but it doesn't, because this is being organized by these Cagliostro, Freemasonic, ascended master channeling agencies who are turning this grouping into an emotional rage bomb of a color revolution. And then they're co-creating the Girondin logicians, the movement of logic that will respond to the Jacobins, and they create the right. The Jacobins create the foundation of the political left, and that's sort of the template of the left and right political classes over the next 250 years or 230 years. And the logicians are all about, no, if you allow emotions to exist, then you get anarchy. We must impose logic everywhere, and they rewrote the calendars to have 10 nice, 10 days, nice, easy to calculate within 100-day months, within whatever. It got stupid. both of them are insane. They result in cutting each other's heads off for like 5 years of civil war. It's a civil war of insanity, a bloodbath, right? Like 50,000, mostly civilians die. The actual people running it don't die, except for a few unacceptable elites who, like Benjamin Franklin, they get to die. And then out of that vacuum of insanity comes a Napoleon that you can introduce as the new emperor to say, okay, both sides are wrong. Let me introduce order and dignity. And I'll be your Führer to bring in 1,000-year Reich. And I'll reintroduce even the Jews. He has a proclamation to reorganize the Jews of Europe to go and live in a new state of Zion that he calls for in 1801. And he calls for the rebuilding of the Solomon Temple as well, and the creation of a new global Roman Empire for 1,000-year Reich. But he doesn't use that word. That's used by one of his followers, a guy who's acting into his archetype a little while longer that people might recognize. But it's all the same formula at the end of the day. So if we are aware of it, we won't fall for it. We'll recognize this in ourselves before we fall into a psyop, I think. And when we see something floating in the night sky over the city of New York or something, we know that it may be more of a hologram and less of an actual Independence Day Jesus.
Don't go worship it. Don't go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay. There's a good chance it's not going to be what I think it is. So Matt, I'll bring up your Twitter page. So it's at Ehret Matthew right there on the screen. And then also your Substack. Highly encourage people to go check out your Substack, subscribed. It's matthewehret.substack.com. You've got just a wealth of information on there, articles, interviews, documentaries, just an incredible amount of information there. You've got some good specials on an antidote to Disclosure Day, the hidden hand behind the UFOs. It's a lot of what we're talking about today. Here's your Black Sun Rising, your new film. Matthew, so again, thank you for coming on the show, giving us your time. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And I guess any final thoughts as we wrap up?
No, that's great. I always really enjoy these jam sessions, man. And thank you for giving me a chance to just talk about these ideas too. It's a great way to start my day.
This is how I'd like to spend my evenings, right? Be sitting around a fire or something, sipping some tea and just chatting like this. This is why I think these are always great discussions. So
it's food. Yes.
Yeah. So Matthew, thank you again, man. Always good talking to you. And we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
All right, man. Okay, bye.